You were well known in the investment world for saying that sometimes there are bubbles and bubbles should be avoided. Do you think we're in a major bubble now, right now in the United States? And do you think that the tech bubble has burst sufficiently so that the tech bubble burst is over?
I think we are descending from the 2021 bubble, which was one of the great bubbles. And this should be normally the deflationary period, the deflating period, which is a function of will the earnings decline, will profit margins decline, will the economy go into recession, and we will have a recession running perhaps deep into next year, and an accompanying decline in stock prices.
So the recession that you're predicting is probably not going to happen in 2023, but maybe...
It may start in 2023.
The Federal Reserve recently said that they think we've cleared the recession hurdle, and they don't really project a recession any longer.
Right.
You disagree with the Fed on that?
Yeah, I think the Fed's record on these things is wonderful. It's almost guaranteed to be wrong. They have never called a recession, and particularly not the ones following the great bubbles. They prided themselves in stimulating the bubbles. They took credit for the beneficial effect of higher asset prices on the economy. They have never claimed credit for the deflationary effect of asset prices breaking, and they always do.
Now, you said not too long ago that you weren't a big fan of Jay Powell and the way he's been handling inflation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you think he's done a better job recently in getting inflation under control?
I think it's largely out of his hands. The forces work. I suspect inflation will never be as low as it averaged for the last 10 years, that we have re-entered a period of moderately higher inflation and therefore moderately higher interest rates. In the end, life is simple. Low rates push up asset prices, higher rates push asset prices down. And we're now in an era that will average higher rates than we had for the last 10 years.
So today, you would say we're likely to go into a recession probably next year, though it could start this year, that the tech bubble burst that we saw beginning, let's say, last year has not yet completely played itself out.
Right.
And we have a little mini bubble a bit in artificial intelligence.
In a way, not so many. They were very big moves in a dozen very big stocks.
So you went to college in England, is that right?
Yes.
And what did you study?
I studied economics.
And you said, okay, now I know economics, I'm ready to go to Harvard Business School. What propelled you to go across the ocean to go to Harvard Business School?
Well, actually, I applied for a job in a consulting firm dominated by Oxford and Cambridge upper-class gentlemen. And the interview was so insulting. He said, come back and see me when you've had 35 years of variegated experience, or you've been to the Harvard Business School. So I walked out, I stood on the sidewalk wondering whether I should burn the building down or apply to Harvard Business School. So I did the latter.
So how did you do at Harvard Business School?
I think I was the classic bottom of the top third.
Okay, so as the bottom of the top third, did you decide to stay in Boston, go back to England? What did you decide to do?
I decided to do what so many of us did, get a job in consulting, management consulting, and use that time to see what was cooking. Actually, it took me the lunch on the first day to realize that consulting was not for me.
All right, so you went to work for Keystone.
Yes.
And then you left there after how many years?
I left there after 9 months.
9 months?
I propositioned my boss, Dean LeBaron, that we might start a new firm on our own.
Well, that produced a lot more money coming in, I assume.
That took care of our problems for a long time.
But when did you become so well known for predicting bubbles or thinking that the markets were out of kilter sometimes? Was that because of your writings or because of your stock picking or your public speeches?
I started writing quarterly letters in 98. And 98, 99, of course, was a glorious bubble. And it just went up and up and up and up. And we fought the bubble all the way. So we were horrifically too early. That was a brutal 2 years, and the earnings were rising as well. So the market made a magnificent move from its all-time high in early '98, went straight up until March of 2000. And our clients did not approve of us being early, and to a very considerable degree fired us.
So people pulled money out, and then when the market finally did have its collapse, the so-called dot-com bubble burst, did people call you up and say, "We're sorry, can we give you our money now"?
Not a single solitary person who fired us came back for the same product that they fired us for. Personnel changed, they inadvertently came back years later, but no one came back. We didn't lose money in 2000, we didn't lose money in 2001, and we did not, by the skin of our teeth, lose money in 2002. So by the time the S&P was down 50%, we had had 3 up years. So that made the firm, that drew in the assets.
Investors are racing to put their money into climate solutions. By the end of last year, the number of global mutual funds and ETFs focused on climate investing climbed 27% from 2021. Collectively, these 1,200 funds manage more than $400 billion. And in the first quarter of 2023, climate-themed ETFs made up 40% of all newly opened funds. But long before it was trendy, billionaire investor Jeremy Grantham was passionate about addressing the climate crisis. In 1997, he and his wife launched the Grantham Foundation for the Protection of the Environment. Now, Grantham is pledging the bulk of his fortune to the foundation to fight climate change. He calls the effort the race of our lives. And for him, the capital flowing into green investing reflects the warnings he's been making for years. Extreme weather like floods and fires have created momentum for policies like carbon taxes, which will transform global investing. As of now, he seems to be correct. Last year's Inflation Reduction Act included roughly $370 billion of climate incentives. And by the end of 2022, global investment in energy transition topped $1 trillion. What are you most worried about when you wake up every day and look at the stock market and the economy?
Well, if you want the honest answer.
Well, I want your honest answers.
It's, I feel that the economy, and particularly the stock market, is very secondary to a list of important long-term problems that we have that no one takes seriously enough yet. And I feel that when we sit here discussing the stock market, we're a little like Emperor Nero fiddling while Rome burns. My job description these days at GMO is working on long-term underrated problems. And it's been a wonderful time to be doing that because we have climate change, the most important issue in the investing world for the next few decades. We have shortages of resources. We have shortages of manpower, a population bust the like of which we have never seen, particularly in a few countries like China, with huge significance. We have an incredible growth in inequality, which I think is the poison in the political system. And we have a great surge of toxicity. I think we've made our planet unfavorable to life in every form, including Homo sapiens. And these are real issues. They're moving incredibly fast. They threaten the well-being of Homo sapiens. They threaten perhaps the existence of a stable global society. But we spend all our time and energy discussing these relatively trivial issues, which I've spent my life studying, and for good or bad, I have spent a lot of effort thinking about the great bubbles.
So let's talk about outside of investing. You are obviously very concerned about climate change, and your foundation is devoted to climate change related things. So what do you do to help climate change? Do you walk a lot? Do you ride bikes? Or what do you do to kind of promote the idea that people should not ruin the environment?
Not enough. I figure, but I have a Tesla, and I feel guilty when I take a jet. But what we do with our money is much more to the point. 50% of our foundation is invested in green technology. And half of that, 25%, we do ourselves. So we have a team of about 6 people, and we've done about 60 deals directly.
It is often thought that there might be a bubble in green investing, because some people say so much money is going into green investing that maybe that's a bubble. Are you worried about that?
I am worried about that, but the good news is countries all over the world are finally realizing this is the serious issue. They're moving their tax structure, they're moving their subsidies, they're moving their research dollars to green. The IRA in the US, a wonderful example, has really set the wheels turning, and the wind is in the sails of green investing. The top line revenue growth of green companies, of EVs, will completely dominate the top line revenue growth of the old gasoline powered vehicles, for example.
So I'm not too late to get into this.
It is very, very early, and for at least the next 100 years, climate change will be the dominant investing issue.
Well, I'm going to call you in 100 years and see how it works out.
I think of myself as a realist, trying to see the world as it really is and not the way I'd like it to be. And sometimes I succeed and sometimes I fail in that.
So let me ask you a few final questions. What is the best investment advice you've ever received? Somebody said, here's what you should do, Jeremy, and you thought it was really good advice.
Darn it, I can't think of any.
Well, maybe nobody gave you any great investment
Maybe they
advice.
didn't. Maybe that's why I've had to make all the mistakes myself.
Okay. What about the worst mistake that the average investor makes? You've seen a lot of investors. Is there a common mistake that investors make?
They get far too enthusiastic, and I understand that. I can get pretty enthusiastic about new deals, new startups when people are presenting them. I like to leave those decisions to my colleagues who have better discipline. So I understand getting carried away, and I invested in that first bubble of 1968 and managed to make a small fortune and lose it. And after that, I became a completely die-hard value manager.
So if I said to you, look, I'm not that wealthy, I have $100,000, I'd like to put it somewhere where I'm not going to lose it, what would you recommend a person? Just an index fund or something else?
No, I think a global index fund that had most of its money outside the US. And if they were up to it, I would say only invest outside the US for the time being. Because this overpricing in the market is mainly a US event. The markets outside the US are not particularly overpriced.
So for a young person today, do you think it's a good idea to go into the money management world today, venture capital, private equity? You think that business is too crowded, and what would you recommend to some young person what they should do now? And do you think the money management business is a good business to be in?
It's a good business for making money. I think it's inherently trivial, which is a problem we've all had to deal with. And I would say a good combination of trying to make money and be useful is go into the venture capital world. Either run a startup yourself or deal with funding the startups and picking the winners and helping the winners. And if you could focus on the real problems that we somewhat talked about, like climate change, then you really are combining a chance of making a lot of money with doing some good.
So would you call yourself overall an optimist or a pessimist? Pessimist because you're saying the markets are always overvalued and we're going to have problems, or an optimist because you've lived a life where you've seen so many great things happen to you?
I think of myself as a realist, trying to see the world as it really is and not the way I'd like it to be. And sometimes I succeed and sometimes I fail in that. But when I focus on new ventures, I must say, it's irresistible to be optimistic. They can really carry you along.